Our quality lab plays a pivotal role in ensuring we comply with international, European, local, and EGGER internal standards. Throughout the year, the lab carries out over 20,000 individual tests on our structural flooring products. These include EGGER P5, EGGER Protect, and EGGER Peel Clean Xtra. We carry out 6 core tests to determine the physical properties of our structural flooring. The bending strength test looks at how a board deforms when force is applied and how much force is required to break the board. The sample size or span is defined by the thickness of the board. The sample is placed on 2 pivots towards the end of the sample, and force is then applied at the center until the board deforms and breaks. The results are recorded in Newton per millimeter. The internal bond test checks the bond of the chips within the core layer of the board. The samples are measured for density. Aluminium blocks are glued onto both sides of the board, and force is then applied to pull the board apart. The force required is measured in Newton per square millimeter. The hot internal bond test demonstrates the bond of the chips in the core layer of the EGGER P5 board and its moisture resistance after being exposed to intense conditions. 10 samples from across the width of the board are tested. Blocks are glued onto both surfaces of the board before the samples are boiled for 2 hours and cooled for 1 hour. Force is then applied to pull the board apart, and the force required is measured in Newton per square millimeter. The swelling test looks at how a board swells over a 24-hour period when fully immersed in water. 10 samples from across the width of the board are tested, and the thickness is measured. The samples are then separated and immersed in water for 24 hours before being removed, and the thickness measured again to calculate the change. The abrasion test measures the ability of the board surface to resist wear through to the sub-layer. The sample is rotated in contact with a pair of loaded cylindrical wheels that are covered with abrasive paper. The number of revolutions required to cause a defined degree of abrasion is used as the measure of resistance to surface abrasion. The skid test looks at the skid resistance of the surface of EGGER P5, EGGER Protect, and EGGER Peel Clean Xtra. The sample is placed on the skid resistance tester, and the pendulum arm is raised. When released, the pendulum foot passes over the surface and measures the resistance due to friction, therefore determining the skid resistance. The top and bottom surfaces of the board are measured and recorded when dry and wet.